Okay, so I am going to present to you a new hypothesis which I am introducing that we call dynamic science. Dynamic science explains how the mind, how the vital force and the DNA are interconnected. That explains the science of holistic systems of medicine. And also that explains so many other things which the current science fails to explain. That includes how homeopathy works. So I'm going to explain to you now how cancer develops and how homeopathy is working. So basically, what is science? Science is to help us realize why and how things are happening. The purpose of science is to, but unfortunately, so many things happening around us is not being explained by the science. That indicates there is a limitation, there is a deficiency with the current science. So my search to understand what is this limitation, what is this deficiency, lead me to the identification of a new set of hypotheses which I call dynamic science. And the most important limitation or deficiency of the science is that the current science is limited its investigations and parameters only to the physical plane. This science is just for technological development, which is not really suitable to study a living organism. And the current science is a linear science, where only material parameters are incorporated. And for example, in the case of a living organism has a physical body, and along with it, associated mind, thought process, and a dynamic entity which we call vital force, which is not visible to us. But the presence of these entities are very essential for the physical body to function its capabilities. That's why if you bring a patient to a high-tech hospital, they transfer the patient to an ICU, and they attach certain metal pieces at certain vital points, and through a processor they monitor that energy presence in the body through a monitor in the form of waves. As long as the waves exist in the monitor, we all know the patient is alive. The moment the waves become a flat line, we know the patient is dead. So presence and absence of energy in a living organism is very important to know and decide that person is alive or not. Even though we observe this, its application and how it influences is not being understood. And how this dynamic entity functions in the maintenance of health, and how it influences in the development of diseases, and how this energy can be utilized in the curative process is never identified and incorporated in the treatment process today. Scientifically, is the biggest failure of the present medical science, which is very important to be rectified the soonest possible time. So dynamic science is expected to create this, transfer this information to the scientific community, and also expected to explain to the scientific community how this process takes place in modern scientific perspective, that will shorten and facilitate a more complete understanding of the functioning of the living organism, that will help us realize treatment process more easier, and also by incorporating the entire components that are involved in the treatment process. So the important question that lead me to the identification of the new scientific hypothesis is a question and answer session, is a logical analysis. So how science progress? Science always progress by questioning answers and answering questions. So it is a series of questioning and answering that happened in my mind that lead to the identification of this process. So the most important objective of this presentation is to explain how cancer develops. That automatically help us understand how to prevent cancer as we understand how cancer develops. And that also automatically help us realize how to treat and manage cancer in a more holistic manner. And the core idea here is to explain how the relationship between the mind, vital force, and DNA works in the development of diseases, and how we can utilize the same relationship to cure the diseases, especially cancer. So to explain, and also to explain the importance of dynamic medicine in the management of cancer. And the dynamic medicine is nothing but our homeopathic medicine. So I'm going to explain these two important things now, how cancer develops and how homeopathic medicine works. So I'm directly going to the core of the idea. Evolution of dynamic science and DS dynamic scientific approach, which is the methodology we are using in the prevention, treatment, and rehabilitation of difficult diseases, most especially cancer. So all these developed by the inductive logical analysis of cancer. Inductive logical analysis of cancer. So it is a series of questioning and answering happened in my mind, taking years, and a continuous thought process happened to identify cancer. Because my basic desire in my life was to make my life worthy by serving humanity. And when I search how can I make my life worthy by serving humanity, in my childhood itself, I developed the thought that if I find a solution to cancer, my life will become worthier. So it has started from my high school days, and that thought process continued. Still, I finished my graduation as a homeopathy doctor, and even after, it is still continuing. So that thought process led me to higher levels of curiosity that had helped me to always think about how cancer develops. And this led me to this following thought process. So what is cancer? Cancer is abnormal fast multiplication of cells. So who decide the rate of cell multiplication? It is decided by the genetic information present in the chromosomes in the nucleus of the cells. So this is a cross section of a cell. You can see the nucleus in the middle, and you can see chromosomes within the nucleus according to the biological understanding. So understandably, according to the current medical biological knowledge, biology, the chromosomes in the middle of the within the nucleus carry the genetic information that controls the entire functioning of the cell and the collective function of the cell as tissues, as organs, and the entire organism as a whole. So the entire functional abilities are decided and controlled and regulated by the genetic information held within the chromosomes. Now, what are these chromosomes? I have one such chromosomes here. If you pull from one end of a chromosome, we will get a structure like this. This structure is called DNA. So this DNA is very important, where our genetic informations are encoded. So what is DNA? DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid. On the right hand side of the screen, we can see a broad picture of a DNA that is called a double helix structure. Whereas it is designed by Watson and Crick, two British scientists. On the left hand side, we can see another little more broadened, enlarged view of a DNA, and the middle we can see a very enlarged view of a DNA. So fundamentally, the genetic makeup within our body is incorporated in our DNA, where only 4 nucleic acids are arranged in a sequential order which carry our genetic information. So this sequential arrangement of nucleic acids actually carry our genetic makeup. So when we do a DNA testing, we are actually checking this order. And this order carries our genetic information. And if there are changes takes place in the sequential arrangement of this order, we call it mutation, and that will change the functional abilities of this DNA. We know another word called gene. A gene is nothing but a segment of DNA that is capable of performing a specific function. So when a gene gets mutated, the functional abilities of that segment of DNA, which used to perform certain functions, get altered. So we know that this DNA is a 3-dimensional structure, double helix structure arranged and oriented in a 3-dimensional manner. So this dimensional orientation also carries specific functional abilities. When the orientation shifts from one direction to another direction, also its functional abilities are altered. So when changes takes place in the orientation of that DNA, where the functional changes happen, we call it epigenetic changes. When the permanent replacement of this nucleic acid happen, and when changes takes place in the functional plane, we call it mutation. Since we are not monitor it in a 3-dimensional manner at present, the epigenetic changes are not being well monitored. Only the mutations are monitored, because we have developed technology to identify the nucleic acid and its sequential order. So the mutations can be identified, by the spatial orientation is not monitored today. So the epigenetic changes, even though we can feel it and identify the changes, the DNA orientation, since we are not able to picture it, the orientation is not observed and identified yet. So these are the 2 possibilities. Epigenetic change and mutation are the 2 possibilities of DNA alterations available now. So the question here, important question here is, if these nucleic acids carry our genetic information, or the spatial or orientation of the 3-dimensional arrangement of these nucleic acids carry our genetic information, who is deciding this spatial orientation or this sequential arrangement in that manner? That decides everything. And that is an important question that give me a big answer, which I call the new hypothesis of dynamic science. So this is the key area which I am contributing to the science in general and medical science in particular, and genetics or biotechnologies in most importantly, that create a big, fill a big vacuum regarding how DNA regulation takes place. So before I state my new hypothesis to you, I bring to your attention what is the difference between a living body and dead body, or how we die, or what really happens during death. If we can divide the death process into 3 stages, before death, during death, and after death, all the functional ingredients and the organs present in the living body before death is totally present in the dead body after death. No material entity was ever taken from the living body at the time of the death to lead to the dead body. But something happened during death that transformed the living body to dead body. So what happened during death is very important. So in order to understand what is the difference between a living body and dead body, or what happened during death, I am going to experiment the living body and dead body with the most important organs that we believe that create and maintains the living phenomena, that is the brain and the heart. We study the brain with the EEG and study the heart with ECG of the living body and dead body, and we can notice that EEG and ECG are positive in the living body and negative in the dead body. This is what we observe in the intensive care unit through the monitoring system, where we see the waves which express as an expression of the presence of energy in the living body. And when that wave in the monitor becomes flat line, that indicates that energy that created and maintained the living phenomena within the physical body left the body. So the wave that expressed that energy presence in the living body became a flat line. So this energy is a big important area that is involved in the creation and maintenance of our living phenomena. But this energy level entity, since we are unable to see it and touch it, or not palpable, and technology has not developed it to measure the frequency, wavelength, and amplitude of this important entity, by which we assess the differentiate the one energy from other energy. This energy is the least, this energy which I call vital force or soul in layman's term, is the least investigated energy, most important to us. So I am bringing to the implications and the importance and relevance of this energy level entity, which I call vital force. So as we know, each energy has a unique frequency, wavelength, and amplitude. And these are the three important parameters that help us identify one energy from another energy. This is again the reason why this energy, that's why different TV stations and TV stations and radio stations broadcast their programs in unique frequencies, and we tune to that frequency and get that channel. In the same way, there is an energy exists in each and every one of us that also carries a unique frequency, wavelength, and amplitude. And that for that parameters has a very important influence within us. And how that influence are interconnected is my hypothesis. So with this much understanding, I am going to state the new hypothesis. The new hypothesis connect the DNA and the vital force that are important in the creation and maintenance of our living phenomena. Before I state my hypothesis, just look at the double helix three-dimensional structure developed by Watson and Crick after studying the properties of DNA. They developed the three-dimensional wave-like structure, which is nearly in two-dimensional manner similar to the possible wave-like appearance of the energy. So this is just an incidental observation I am bringing to your attention to understand the relationship between this vital force and our DNA. When this vital force has a three-dimensional existence, it will become almost similar to our DNA in the three-dimensional manner. So my new hypothesis is that the sequential arrangement of nucleic acids that decides the functional ability of each and every gene in that DNA is nothing but a physical proportionate expression of the frequency, wavelength, and amplitude of the vital force that creates and maintains the living phenomena in that organism. I'll repeat it once again. The sequential arrangement of the nucleic acids in the DNA that decides everything about the functional ability of that organism is nothing but a proportional physical expression of the frequency, wavelength, and amplitude of the energy that governs the living phenomena in that organism. So if this hypothesis is right, if we can modify the frequency, wavelength, and amplitude of our vital force, that will modify automatically the sequential arrangement of nucleic acids in our DNA. I hope you are following me. Now the next question is it possible to modify the frequency, wavelength, and amplitude of our vital force? Before answering that question, I am bringing to your attention another important dynamic entity called mind. And another hypothesis is that each thought that we allowed to develop in our minds is an energy vibrational frequency with a unique frequency, wavelength, and amplitude. So when different kind of thoughts we develop in our minds, we are actually producing vibrational frequency, vibrations of different frequency, wavelength, and amplitude. So when a living person gone living in that organism, can you somebody speak, and am I audible to you, Dr. Maria?
Yes, Dr. Shai. Here we
Okay.
are, and we can hear you and see you very good.
Okay. So when there is energy level entity, when we are developing thought process, we are creating vibrational frequencies and releasing to the universe from the inner core of ourself, where the mind occupies, which is not detected so far, but it is happening. So when a living person gone existing, there exists two energy vibrational frequencies in the same body, in the same physical plane at the same time, same body at the same time. One is the energy vibrational thoughts that we allow to develop in our mind as a unique frequency, wavelength, and amplitude. And the other one is the vital force energy, which exists with a certain frequency, wavelength, and amplitude. Now, how the mind influences the soul or the vital force or the spirit? It is, we can understand it by through two physics theories, theory of resonation and theory of superposition or interference. Theory of resonation and theory of superposition. So I'm going to get the help of a physics scientist who will explain to us through a small video where using a sonometer and a tuning fork in physics lab, a physics scientist will explain to us what is theory of resonation, and through a graphic presentation, we will understand what is superposition. So we are going to share this video. Please watch this video and see the.
Let me explain the remarkable phenomena of resonance and also the superposition of waves. Some external different frequencies superimposed over a string which is vibrating at its natural frequency, modifications will occur to the initial natural frequency. At resonance, the system will oscillate at maximum amplitude. A vibrating object will pick out its resonant frequencies from a complex excitation and vibrate at those frequencies, essentially filtering out the other frequencies present in the excitation. Let us see how we study resonance. A sonometer and a tuning fork can be used for this. Now, how we understand the resonance? A tuning fork available in a laboratory is struck and the stem is placed solidly on the sonometer. When the wire is tuned to the frequency of the fork, sympathetic resonance can be heard. Now, the usual method of determining resonance is by placing a small paper rider on the string. On resonance, as the string vibrates strongly, the paper rider falls off.
This is resonation.
What happens when two waves of different frequencies and amplitude traveling in the same medium meet? We observe the formation of a new wave with modified parameters. This is explained by the behavior of overlapping waves, distributed as superposition of waves or interference. This can be easily understood by looking at this graphic presentation.
So when two waves of different frequencies coexist in the same body at the same time, they overlap each other and the permanently existing wave frequency get altered accordingly.
When two or more waves are present simultaneously at the same medium at the same time. The resultant is the sum of disturbances from the individual waves. At a sufficiently large amplitude, the superposition principle often breaks down and the interacting waves may scatter off each other, lose amplitude, or change their form.
So this is a very important information that will help us realize. When we are living, there are minimum two vibrational frequencies that is possibly developing and existing within our body. One is the thought process, which varies from positivity to negativity. And when the nature of thought process happening in our minds are altered, the frequency, wavelength, and amplitude of these thoughts also will be varied. So based on the nature of the thoughts that we allow to develop in our minds, these thoughts are developed at the core of ourself and released to the universe. While that is traveling, it will superpose with the vital force that exists within and even beyond us aura in our physical body, will be superposed and modified accordingly. So this is the importance of maintaining a disciplined and naturally positive mind. The naturally positive is very, very relevant, naturally positive. So when we have happy, comfortable, mature, peaceful, and naturally positive thoughts developing in our minds, that will superpose with our vital force and modify its frequency, wavelength, and amplitude to a healthy, pure, and stable state, resulting into a constructive DNA alteration or mutation in our DNA. But when we have negative emotions developing in our minds, which include anger, hatred, enmity, depression, grief, jealousy, fear, anxiety, worry, insecurity, guilty feeling, anything negative, that will superpose with the vital force and modify its frequency, wavelength, and amplitude to a destructive level, leading to a destructive mutation or alteration or epigenetic change in the DNA. So these are very important things, which is not able to explain and understand in a laboratory examination or research study. So that's why this phenomenon is never incorporated. And when we do laboratory investigations of research using three-dimensional objective or through objective observations only, the subjective feelings of the organism involved, and especially the most important, highest developed human beings. Through laboratory investigation, the subjective observations of the modifications in the thought process and the nature of the thinking are totally ignored in the current medical research studies. This is a big mistake happening, and the role and influence of this thought process in modifying, superposing our vital force and modifying its frequency, wavelength, and amplitude, whereby the possibility of modifying our DNA through mutation or epigenetic change is never understood by the medical science today, and this is the biggest vacuum that need to be immediately rectified to understand the physical functioning and its modification in a holistic perspective. So what are the different modes of DNA alteration or mutation possible? The most important possibility is through the superposition of the vital force by the thoughts that we allow to develop in our own minds. And the second possibility is through the direct superposition of the vital force. The first possibility I already explained. And the second possibility is through the direct superposition of the vital force by the energy vibrational frequencies coming from outside our body. That include man-made energy vibrational frequencies like X-rays, mobile frequencies, thoughts of others. If I am angry to another person, when I release that thought process, when I develop that thought process and release that to the universe, I am the first inflicted person. If I have positive thinking, it will constructively modify my vital force. If I have negative thinking, it will destructively modify my own vital force. But when I release that thought process to the universe, thinking about a person or a group of people, it will travel, it will superpose with the, it will travel with the unidentified speed, and it will inflict the person's targeted and superpose with the vital force of that individuals and modify its frequency, whereby modifying the DNA also. But if there is positive thinking, thoughts developing and maintained within that person, that thought process happening within that person will nullify and modify the external influences. So if a person remain internally positive, the negative influences coming from outside will not be inflicting that person. But if that person is also having negative thoughts and somebody else are sending negative vibrations towards that person, it will amplify and make the damage multiplied. And this is happening. And another external impact that can influence us is the cosmic influence, including cosmic radiations, including the magnetic influence of different planets, different galaxies, the entire universe on us. And this is actually the science behind the study of astrology also, which most of the time some people exploit those who are not well educated with that. But there is a science even with astronomy and astrology, especially with astrology also. So before I am a strong critic of astrology, now I am a student of astrology, because that astrological influences can influence us also. Because different planets move around either in clockwise or counterclockwise direction. And based on these movements, there are different flexes of influence living in each and every corner of the universe, and that will have different pull and push on us, and that also will have influences in the frequency, wavelength, and amplitude of our vital force, that will be influencing our thought process, our physical functioning, and everything. Even you can understand the presence and absence of moon is creating uptide and low tide in the sea. See how much influence raise the level of water to few meters during uptide and lowering the sea water few meters during low tide is utilized in even bringing big ships across certain man-made rivers like that during uptide and low tide. So this has that much influence on water. It has influence on our vital force and our physical functions also through such influences. And the third possibility is through physical plane, through biochemical reactions. Unfortunately, the third possibility is the only possibility the current world is considering in its research studies. The most important, the energy vibrational and energy superposition and resonating possibility is totally neglected scientifically by the current medical research studies and the current material science based research methodologies is a huge mistake happening in medical science today, which need to be rectified as soon as possible. So the introduction of these new set of hypotheses in the name of dynamic science is expected to create that awareness in the scientific community to transform the research methodologies from linear scientific consideration to non-linear multidimensional possibilities where individualization of treatment, individualized treatments and individualized consideration become prioritized and become so worthy. So the business model of today and the scientific inclusion criteria that it should be everything happens should be replicable is no more applicable in non-linear scientific understanding, because when two individuals get connected, how they cooperate each other can amplify and make the success of their relationship a multitude high if they cooperate each other. But if they become jealous and destroy each other, that relationship will be the most ruining and destructive relationship, and that will not be contributory, and that will not be constructive and healthy also. They will be destroying each other. So this is very important. This is the non-linear science says that the possibilities of 1 plus 1 can be plus 10,000, plus 50,000, or minus 50,000, or minus 75,000. So the possibilities are not fixed. So only in linear science, the 1 plus 1 is 2. But in non-linear science, 1 plus 1 can be multitudes or possibilities. And this is what is happening in a living organism when more than one parameters are involved. These perspectives are not at all identified and incorporated in our scientific research methodology. Still now we are proceeding with the two-dimensional linear science-based research protocols and methodologies that only will be able to help us infer one-dimensional and one question only will be answered, and the multiple possibilities are never incorporated there. This is a very important idea. This is a very important information that we need to incorporate to modify our research strategies, our research investigative parameters, and the possibilities into a common generic perspective, to individualized perspective. That's why if different homeopathic doctors have different prescriptions, that is a possibility, and that is the reality, and that is the real science, not the perspective that all doctors should come out with the same prescriptions. That is not the right thing. The other thing is the right thing in dynamic scientific perspective and holistic scientific perspective, in my opinion. So I'm not going to elaborate that now. So an important observation made in my cancer research is that each emotions are inflicting with each organs that produce cancer or damage to that organ. So when we have a particular organ affected, we can constantly see a particular emotional state associated with the affinity to that particular organ. And we have identified certain emotions connected to certain organs that we are utilizing in the prevention, treatment, and rehabilitation of our cancer patients now. And that is what we are applying as dynamic scientific approach along with the homeopathic medicine, which is capable of influencing the dynamic components of our existence going beyond the physical plane. So now I am going to the homeopathy side. How these homeopathy medicines go beyond the physical plane to influence the dynamic components. So today we study atomic theory. Atomic theory says that matter is composed of atoms. Atom is the basic unit of matter. But who produced the word atom? Who brought out the word atom? If we look into history, we can see the word atom is introduced by two Greek philosophers, Leucippus and Democritus. And Leucippus and Democritus defined atom as the finest end product, end unit of every matter, which is no more divisible and uncuttable. And that is the end unit. But today, our atomic theory states even the atom is made up of subatomic particles, electron, proton, and neutron. So the atomic theory itself is contradictory and not matching with the fundamental concept of atom introduced by Leucippus and Democritus. And this atomic theory failed to answer so many other questions also. For example, if we take a piece of paper and burn the paper, we are breaking it down. When we break down the paper, we are getting light and heat. And light and heat are mere energy vibrational frequencies. It is neither electron, proton, or neutron of varying frequencies. So atomic theory fails to answer from where huge quantity of energy is released in atom bomb when a small atom is broken or breaks by bombarding it with another minute frequency. When it breaks down, huge quantity of energy is released. From where this energy comes from? Atomic theory fails to explain that. That is the area where quantum theory sets in. Quantum theory has a different perspective. In quantum theory, matter is made of quanta of energy. And I am in favor of that quantum theory, and I am redefining matter or atom based on quantum theory. And my definition of matter is that matter is made up of condensed energy units of varying frequency, wavelength, and amplitude as the fundamental units. And these vibrational units are remaining stabilized in spinning in its own axis, which I call an atom. So atoms are nothing but vibrational frequencies with the different frequency, wavelength, and amplitude that remain fixed and self-spinning in its own axis, which remains stabilized. And in solid state, and each of these fundamental units has a particular frequency, wavelength, and amplitude of spinning or vibrational frequency, even though it remains spinning in its own axis and remains stabilized. And the difference in the frequency, wavelength, and amplitude of the spinning or frequency of that particular unit of atom constitute its unique functional ability. And in solid state, these energy vibrational frequencies are heavily compressed and arranged in unique manners. That's why it is solid in nature. And in liquid state, it is loosely compressed. And in gaseous state, it is very loosely compressed. And in space, it is not at all compressed. And planets are nothing but compressed energy units of solid, liquid, and gases. And stars are nothing but concentrated energy vibrations which can come out and go in any time. So with this understanding, we are trying to understand potentization. Potentization is a unique way of homeopathic medicine preparation with a continuous process of dilution of the medicinal substance with a vehicle through succussion or trituration, whereby breaking down the compressed energy units in the substance to individual energy units or to an energy level, so that the energy units within can resonate and superpose with the vital force to bring back its lost purity and stability. I will explain further. So the scientificity of homeopathy. So what is acting curatively in homeopathic medicine is nothing but these energy vibrational units remained as atoms with our new definition of an atom based on quantum theory in dynamic science. These compressed energy units will be constantly released from its compressed stable state because of the continuous dilution and succussion or trituration, where the threshold of its bonding and compressive force will be released by expanding its through dilution and succussing it, forcing it. So when for example, if the sulfuric acid, which is made up, which molecule is made up of certain point of compressed quanta of energy, it has a threshold of keeping it united. When we expand and separate it, when it's a quantum, there is a word called quantum critical quantum point. Quantum critical point. When the quantum critical point is reached, it will break up. So, for example, Earth has a quantum critical point to hold the Earth together. When the quantum critical point of Earth planet is lost, it will disperse itself. So how microcosm, such will be the arrangement of microcosm also. So we can see in microcosm, solar system, and so many galaxies outside the solar system, each of which has multitudes of arrangements with concentrated energy as stars in the middle and planets revolving it. All these are compressed energy vibrations or concentrated energy vibrations which are remaining and sustaining in a stabilized manner because of the balanced forces where it remains. When the balance break, the critical quantum point is broke, and that will release and that cause disruption. So through continuous dilution of the medicinal substance we are using, these atoms are arranged within the some medicinal substance we are used to prepare our medicine, is also arranged in such a manner within the microcosm also, and we are separating, we are diluting and expanding it from a compressed manner. The quantum critical point we are breaking, when the energy remain compressed in that particular quantum critical point, will be released and it will be dispersed and it will become more available to influence as an energy vibrational frequency. So how homeopathy works? When we are proving a homeopathic medicine, the potentized homeopathic medicine will be given to a healthy human beings, a person, where the released energy vibrational frequencies are present in that medicine will superpose with the vital force of that person and produce temporary alteration in the vital force of that person. And that alteration will be impacted to the physical body, producing signs and symptoms from head to foot holistically. We note it down. And that is what we study in our Materia Medica as provings. And when our vital force has a similar derangement, similar to the fundamental frequency, wavelength, and amplitude of each medicine, that alteration happened in the vital force of each sick individual will present, modify the physical functioning proportionately, producing similar symptomatology in the sick person. So during case taking, we study the signs and symptoms and take the totality of symptoms as the external expression of the internal derangement happened in the vital force level. And we compare this totality of symptoms with the provings available in our Materia Medica and choose a medicine that produces similar symptoms at the time of proving. It means that the vibrational frequency remaining released or free during our potentization process has a similar frequency, wavelength, and amplitude similar to the altered frequency, wavelength, and amplitude of our vital force. That's why the expressions of the proving and the altered vital force expressed in the signs and symptoms in the sick individual remain same. So when we give the similar medicine to the patient, since the liberated energy present in the medicine is similar to the alteration happened in the vital force of that person, it will resonate immediately, as we have seen in the experiment, and reinstate the lost purity of the vital force, whereby stability is achieved and the functions start becoming normal again. And this is how homeopathy works. So counseling as a curative medicine, as our thought process has immense influence on the frequency, wavelength, and amplitude of our vital force. If a person living with a wrong, unnatural concept and attitude, we need to identify it, to inform that person to rectify that, so that that person will be living with such a mental concept and attitude to produce natural, positive, comfortable, and universally acceptable concept and attitude, to produce right line of thinking, constructively positive line of thinking, naturally positive line of thinking, that will be superposing with our vital force to produce a natural, healthy, curative mutation or alteration or health maintenance. Otherwise, the negative thought process, unnatural thought process will superpose with our vital force and modify the spatial orientation of our DNA, our DNA, or modify the sequential arrangement of our nucleic acids, which will produce destructive mutation or destructive epigenetic changes in our DNA that will be expressed as signs and symptoms. But if that mentality persists, there will be permanent fixation of the damage takes place, that we call mutation, and that will be expressed as signs and symptoms. That is how diseases develop, chronic diseases develop, which we can notice in every case, in every chronic case. So with this, I conclude my presentation by bringing to your awareness how cancer develop by destructive DNA alteration or mutation through mind, vital force, and body, and how to prevent cancer by maintaining the purity of mind, vital force, and body, and how we manage cancer by the understanding of the causes of cancer by case taking and analysis, and helping the patient and family to realize it by proper counseling and help them to get rid of it, helping the patient to maintain the mind at the positive, happy, and comfortable side by the help of yoga, meditation, prayers, and proper understanding. This is how yoga, meditation, prayer, and self auto suggestions all become important. And second step is medicine and surgical management. If the tumor is very big in size, we will not be able to reverse the process of tumor all of a sudden. So we need to do surgically remove that. So see, and also from medicinal side, since life is created and maintained by a dynamic entity, we need a medicine that will be able to go beyond the material plane to influence the dynamic components of our existence, especially our vital force, to influence and rectify its frequency, wavelength, and amplitude. So the most important medicine which can do that important function is our homeopathic medicine. And the homeopathic medicine is the most important medicine capable of doing that, and that is the scope and relevance and future of homeopathy in future. And the third management is food management to maintain the physical functions. Even though our mind and vital force are purified, to maintain our DNA in a perfect harmony and healthy state, to bring the information using the mRNA and functional extensional arms. The normally existing DNA needs functional arms. For that, we need to provide with the proper sufficient nutrition also. So maintaining the physical plane also in harmony with the right natural nutrition, healthy nutrition is also important. So with this, I conclude my presentation. I hope you understand my small presentation to bring a big paradigm shift in our thought process, and to bring to your awareness about the need to shift our scientific research activities and thought process.